oldie but goodie. An oldie but goodie. Oldie but goodie. I like it. I like it. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to another edition of The Hype Show. It is I, Big J, all day, a.k.a. the mighty Big J. Thank you so much for joining me here this morning here. Again, this is the Sunday edition of The Hype Show. It is October 15th, 2023. And again, today, this is episode 14 of The Hype Show. We're going to talk about the Thursday night results of the NFL between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. Also, I'm going to start with giving you an update on the current game going on here, the international game taking place, and then we'll talk about the rest of today's action, and we'll also preview the Sunday night football matchup between the New York Giants and the Buffalo Bills, and lastly, the Monday night football matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Los Angeles Chargers. So let's get into it. First, we're going to, again, update you on the current score at this current time. The Baltimore Ravens lead the Tennessee Titans in the third quarter, 18-13. This is part of the NFL International Series. This game is actually taking place overseas here at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in England. So this is the third of many international games. I think there's a couple more international games on the schedule later in the season with different teams. So it's a very nip-tuck game here. It was actually 18-3 at the half, and the Titans have scored 10 points here in the third quarter to make it close. So it was looking very bleak for a second. Lamar Jackson has 3 interceptions in this game. 3 interceptions. He's not having that great of a game today. And Baltimore is actually very lucky to have the lead at the moment, considering how he's playing. He hasn't been that consistent, say, from a little bit I've seen so far. But I apologize. He has just the 1 interception here, but he has 3 in the last couple of weeks in total. I apologize. I got that wrong. He has 1 interception today. But yeah, the interception that he threw, I don't know what he was thinking when he threw that football. Luckily for him, Ryan Tannehill has been very average. Derrick Henry is doing a lot for that offense. He has 9 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown. So he's the one that's doing the damage for the Titans so far. But again, about the middle of the third quarter, the Baltimore Ravens lead 18-13. I'll check back on that score here later in the broadcast and see what's going on with that. But let's get back to the Thursday night football matchup. That's how we kicked off week 6 here. And that matchup was the Denver Broncos visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. And the final for that was the Kansas City Chiefs winning 19-8. Mahomes did throw 1 touchdown pass here. And to go along with that, his passing statistics that he had here, he was 30 of 40 for 306 yards. He did also have an interception as well. That was caught by Denver safety Justin Simmons. Side note, actually, Justin Simmons has the most career interceptions against Patrick Mahomes of any player. He got his 4th interception off Patrick Mahomes last night, or Thursday night, excuse me. So interesting stat for a game that wasn't very interesting for the Broncos, nevertheless. Conversely, Russell Wilson was 13 of 22 for 95 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Not a good game at all. He didn't even throw for 100 yards passing here. As far as running the football for Kansas City, Isaiah Pacheco led the way with 16 carries for 62 yards, followed by Patrick Mahomes having 6 carries of his own for 31 yards. On the Denver side, Javonte Williams, he was back he didn't play in the game the previous Sunday against the Jets, but he was back for this game with 10 carries for 52 yards. Russell Wilson added 4 carries for 31 yards, and Jaleel McLaughlin, the undrafted rookie, he had 7 carries for 30 yards. Denver did outrush the Chiefs, but that's not really what mattered because, again, if you're only passing for 95 yards, that means you ran for more than you threw. That's not going to really work unless you have high numbers in both categories. So, again, not a great game statistically, offensively for Denver at all. Excuse me. On the passing side for Kansas City, Travis Kelce, the tight end, caught 9 catches for 124 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. Wide receiver Rashee Rice had 4 catches for 72 yards, and running back Isaiah Pacheco added 6 catches for 36 yards out of the backfield. So he had 98 yards from scrimmage on the ground. The touchdown was actually a 1-yard touchdown to Kadarius Toney, who had 3 catches for 9 yards. So it was like right on the goal. It was basically right in the red zone. It was within 5 yards, and he just threw an out route right to him for the touchdown. That was the only thing he really needed to do to get them going and get them in the end zone. That was the only touchdown that they had on offense. But Harrison Butker was pretty much their offensive weapon. so to speak. He was 4 for 4 from range, and he even hit a 60-yard field goal to close out the first half and make it 13-0. So the way I see it, Kansas City, they didn't play that well on offense, but at the same time, they didn't need to. They played very well on defense, and their special teams was money. Again, Harrison Butker scored all your points. And when you have a reliable kicker like that, he's typically going to do that. He's been very reliable for them lately. On the Denver side, they flipped from how they played on Sunday against the Jets, the previous Sunday, the Week 5 matchup that they had. The thing about this game was that the defense actually came to play, whereas they didn't play that well against the Jets, and they got carved up. Brees Hall had 177 yards on the ground for the Jets by himself. This game, the defense actually played pretty well because holding Kansas City to 19 points, if your offense can do anything, you can win that football game. Kansas City, interestingly enough, they were favored by 10.5 and they won by 11. So those of you bettors out there, you actually were still able to cover despite this being a low scoring game. But the Broncos are just not equipped to take care of that. They're just not equipped to take advantage of that. And this team, they're 1-5 for the first time since 1994. They were also 1-5, and this is the fourth time in franchise history that the Broncos have started 1-5. So again, two losses in the same calendar week. What do you do with this team? You're now 1-5. You weren't even 1-5 last season. There was a little bit more optimism there because the offense wasn't playing that well, but the defense was humming last season. They were playing awesome. So as far as Kansas City goes here, again, they won't have another game here for 10 days. Looking ahead to their schedule, they're going to be playing against the Los Angeles Chargers actually on October 22nd. So 7 days from today at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS, they'll be hosting the Chargers. Then they'll be playing the Broncos again at Denver October 29th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they have an international game November 5th at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That game will be played on the NFL Network if you want to watch that. And it's going to be played in Germany at Frankfurt Stadium. So this matchup is probably going to be pretty even, in my opinion. We'll just have to see a few weeks down the road, but that's going to be a very good matchup. They have a bye week after that, and then they're home again for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that takes place 15 days later. That's November 20th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC for Monday Night Football. That's going to be a great matchup. Then 6 days later, that following Sunday, they're at the Las Vegas Raiders, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So looking ahead here, that's going to be a very interesting matchup because they're coming off what I like to call a mini bye. Whenever you have a week 5 matchup that's on a normal Sunday, then you have a Thursday night game. That gives you 10 days in between games, so that gives you a little bit more time. Even though you had the 2 games back to back, you have more time for the following game. So I think the Chiefs can get the kinks worked out. And as far as the Chargers here, they're playing tomorrow night, so they had their bye last week. So they'll be coming off of a short week in a sense because it'll be 6 days later. Excuse me. Um, that game, since they're at home, I would normally take the Chiefs. If they play like they played against the Broncos, against the Chargers have what it takes to take advantage of that. Austin Eckler, I assume he'll be back for that game, and I think he's going to be back tomorrow night against the Cowboys. He said, I think he's ready to go. So if you have Austin Eckler back and you still have Kellen Allen, you still have weapons in the backfield and at the wide receiver, they're going to be missing Mike Williams a lot. And the rookie Quentin Johnston hasn't quite stepped up for the Chargers yet. We're still waiting to see what he can do in that offense. But I still think the Chargers have enough to exploit the Chiefs if they play lackluster again. I just don't foresee the Chiefs playing like that again. I just think that coming off of 2 road games and having a short week like that is why they played like that. They were just on the road at Minnesota that previous Sunday. So the Denver Broncos, as I said, they just didn't have what it takes or have the people in place to take advantage of that. So, on a side note here for the Chiefs here, they wide receiver Justin Watson, he actually had dislocated his elbow in that game, unfortunately against Denver. But the good news is that there was no structural damage. He's obviously going to be out for a few weeks, looks like 3 to 5 weeks, but there was no structural damage that they were worried about for the future. So they're just going to obviously not have him, but that's a gruesome injury that I hear about. But he's very fortunate to not have the damage to the elbow that he could have had. But back to Kansas City and the schedules that they have over the next 6 weeks with that bye squeezed in there. I can see them again beating the Chargers at home and also beating Denver again on the road. The Miami game, the bye week, and then the Philadelphia Eagles game after the bye week. That's their next 3 weeks after that. That's where things get interesting. The Miami game is a pick 'em because that's international. If that matchup were taking place in Kansas City or Miami, I could see either team having the advantage as a result. But because that's an international game, I'll probably have a pick for you closer to that game. I'm leaning Kansas City, but I wouldn't sleep on Miami because they're having a pretty solid year. And there's a possibility that Devin Achane, the running back, might be back by then. I keep mispronouncing his last name. I honestly don't know how to say it. I think it's Devin Achane, I believe how I say it. But there's a possibility he could be back. He missed last week on Miami's game against the Giants, and he's going to miss the next couple after that. But there's a possibility he could be back for that. So that's going to make their offense solid again. And then with Jeff Wilson, he's still actually on injured reserve for the Dolphins, so he's not going to be back yet either. His injuries are still bad enough to where they want to keep him on injured reserve. So I'll have more analysis closer to that week when Kansas City and Miami play. Again, the bye week, and then Kansas City plays the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to be a very interesting game too. Obviously, it's not the Super Bowl. This is a Super Bowl rematch in a sense, but there's nothing on the stake outside of standings, position, and jockeying in each conference for these teams. So by the time we get to that game here, I'll have a better idea how that game is going to go as well. Because Kansas City, their schedule just hasn't been very difficult yet. They haven't had any tough games yet, so we'll get to see more of the meat and potatoes of their schedule later in the year. So again, I'll have a prediction for that. I'm going to say that they beat the Vegas Raiders at Kansas City that following Sunday because looking at their division, they're the only team to me that's going to do anything. The Chargers have injuries and have had injuries all season. The Broncos are the Broncos, and then the Raiders are the Raiders, even though they have 2 wins. They have wins over the Broncos and the Green Bay Packers. So none of these teams in the AFC West outside of the Chiefs really put any fear in anyone's heart. So they would be at worst possibly 3-2 over their next 5 to 6 weeks with that bye squeezed in, but I could see them winning one of those games. They just have to play more dynamic. They just haven't really gotten off to that rocket ship start yet. The only game where they really blew anybody away was Chicago back in week 3, 41-10. But all their games have been close. Even in a loss by 1 to Detroit, they've their biggest margin of victory outside of that 31 points was the 11 against the Broncos. They haven't really blown anybody out like they usually do. So we'll just have to see how that goes for Kansas City. Regarding Denver, um, this season just has need to do more all written all over it. As I said, they're home against the Green Bay Packers, and I've stated I think the Packers can win this game. They have a bye week this week. The bye week teams this week are the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They do not have games at all this week. So the Green Bay Packers will be coming to Denver off of a bye week and possibly having Aaron Jones back. If it's a situation where they have Aaron Jones back, Jordan Love really hasn't had the utilization of his weaponry all season because of the hamstring issue he's dealing with. So if they get him back, I think Denver will be in trouble because he can run the ball like Brees Hall, but he can also catch the ball really well out of the backfield. He can run routes. So that'll be a problem for Denver. That their defense is statistically 32nd in dang near everything. You trade Randy Gregory away to the 49ers for a low draft pick swap, basically. And now Frank Clark has been released. He was released as of yesterday. So you brought on those guys here to make that defense better and make that defense more stout as far as the opposition, and it has not worked out. The Packers and Chiefs, even though those next 2 games are at home on the 22nd and the 29th, respectively, each game at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. I'm calling those L's. You lost to the Raiders, Commanders, and Jets at home. The Raiders, Commanders, and Jets won't even make the playoffs, I guarantee. I guarantee none of those 3 teams even get in the playoffs this year, and the Broncos lost to those teams. Those aren't even contenders that you lost to. The only contender that the Broncos have lost to are the Chiefs and Dolphins. Their other 3 losses were at home, no less. So give me the Packers and Chiefs to win those games. The Broncos mercifully have a bye week after that for their week 9. They won't have a matchup week 9. Week 10 for Monday Night Football, they're at the Buffalo Bills. That's going to be rough. So I'm going to call that an L too. I could see Josh Allen just having a 100-yard rushing day possibly. Like he has the ability to take off running a lot more than anybody. He's a bigger guy when he runs the ball. He's about 6'4". So I could see him having a day on the Broncos. And then the Broncos are home 6 days later for Sunday Night Football, November 19th against the Minnesota Vikings. That's supposed to be at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And then the following week, they're home against the Cleveland Browns, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 26th on Fox. I don't see where the win comes from except possibly Minnesota because there was a report yesterday regarding the Minnesota Vikings that Justin Jefferson is possibly going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. So with him being placed on IR, he's going to miss a minimum of 4 games, but they're saying he's going to miss up to 6 possibly. So he may not be available for that matchup against the Broncos, and that's possibly a situation that's 5 weeks away. If he's not available for that game, that'd possibly be the last game he missed. And if he's not available, that makes that game even less appealing to watch because Minnesota, they're a 1-4 foot or 1-4 football team. They have their game later today. Who's to say if that game's going to be any good? They might flex that game out of the scheduling because that's an upcoming holiday weekend. People are probably going to be more tuned in. So I could see that game getting flexed out. But as far as the Broncos, pack it up. That's all you can really do is pack it up. I talked to a lot of Bronco fans, and a lot of Broncos fans are just flat out delusional. They're just below Cowboys fans and Raiders fans at this point. It's tougher to talk to Broncos fans, ironically, than other groups of fans, and it shouldn't be like that, but it is. Broncos fans are delusional. I literally had a Broncos fan tell me the previous Wednesday night, I'm not making this up. I had a Broncos fan tell me that the Broncos were going to reel off a streak starting with an upset over the Chiefs and that they would finish 11-6 and head all the way to the Super Bowl against the Detroit Lions. That's how Broncos fans are when I talk to them. The reasonable Broncos fans are gone. I don't know where they went. I really don't. But if you're the Broncos, pack it in. Going back to the game we were talking about earlier, the Baltimore Ravens, the third quarter, the Baltimore Ravens, they lead the Tennessee Titans 18-13 in the third quarter. Actually, just finished. They're heading to the fourth quarter. So I'll keep you updated on that game and get you a final score before this broadcast is completed. The next game we're going to talk about here, all these games coming up here are going to be 1 p.m. Eastern that I'm going to be talking about here. The Washington Commanders are headed to Atlanta to face the Atlanta Falcons at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That game is a pick 'em as far as I'm concerned. Atlanta is favored by 1.5, but this game could go either way as far as I'm concerned. The Commanders, they started out at 2-0 and have lost their last 3 straight games, unfortunately. And the Falcons, they started out 2-0 as well, but they've been 0-3, or I'm sorry, 1-2 since they started out 2-0. So it's been kind of rough going the last few games for each team. This game to me is going to come down to quarterback play. There's nothing about this game that screams out blockbuster, and the better team is going to win. Bijan Robinson, if he can do anything against that defense, that'll definitely help out Desmond Ritter. Each of these quarterbacks are second-year quarterbacks, and they each had great career best passing games last week. They both played very well. But against each other, I just don't know how this game is going to shape up. So we'll just have to see who is the better player at the quarterback position. I think that's what it's going to come down to. And timely plays on defense. I'm leaning towards Atlanta winning this game just due to the fact that they're at home. That's really the only reason I would have to lean towards Atlanta is because they're at home. And they have a just ever so slightly more dynamic offense than the Washington Commanders do. Again, Sam Howell, he had a pretty solid start. He's been very even, as I would say. He has 6 touchdowns, but he also has 6 interceptions. It's very up and down play, to say the least. And me, again, I'm leaning towards the Falcons to win this game today. It'll be very close. I don't expect a blowout. I'd be very shocked if there was a blowout, but we'll just have to see how that game shapes up. After the game today, the Falcons here, they'll be at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next Sunday, October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Tennessee Titans, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 29th on CBS. The following week, they're home against the Minnesota Vikings, November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Arizona Cardinals, November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they head into their bye week. Interesting games coming up here. A lot of pick'ems. The Atlanta Falcons, I don't know what they are. I don't know what they are because their slate that they've had so far, they've played mediocre teams with the exception of Detroit. Detroit beat them back in week 3 at Detroit, but Detroit played okay and beat them. Detroit didn't even have to bring their A game that day. The Jacksonville Jaguars game, that was a whooping too, but that game was international, so that game had less of a home advantage than I thought it would, or it had less of a home advantage than it should. But Jacksonville, they with them being in England, they won both of those games, so Jacksonville's like a second home to them. So to me, their schedule lines up the way it does, mostly because they're a mediocre football team. When you're a mediocre team, you play the other mediocre teams in your conference and possibly out of conference. So they don't really have any juggernaut games on their schedule to me. With at Tampa Bay, I'm gonna call that a loss because of the fact that Baker Mayfield is the better quarterback, and with them being on the road, I could see why Tampa Bay getting out to a quick lead, like a 10-0 lead in that game. The following week at Tennessee, their biggest hurdle, their biggest worry is definitely going to be Derrick Henry. If they can keep Ryan Tannehill in check, which has been the case with a lot of teams this year so far, Tannehill he hasn't had that great of a year at all, and just his career overall has been very average. If they can contain Ryan Tannehill and focus on keeping that running game in check, they could possibly win that game. But with them being on the road, I could see King Henry getting off. Home against Minnesota, that's going to be very interesting because, again, the absence of Justin Jefferson, as I talked about briefly with Denver, that's going to affect Minnesota's offense and what they do. So I'll know closer to that game what they're going to do. Justin Jefferson could bounce back sooner, but they're saying he's not going to be evaluated for 4 weeks. So he'll probably be out for that game. At the Arizona Cardinals feels like a pick 'em as well, but Joshua Dobbs, he's been more dynamic so far than Desmond Ritter, surprisingly. But Joshua Dobbs, he's been in the league a few years. He's just a journeyman. He's just bounced around a few different teams, but he's been more dynamic on offense for them. And Kyler Murray, I don't see him even being back yet. He may still be out. So Arizona, I could see them taking that game just off of the simple fact that they actually would have the better quarterback that day, the Arizona Cardinals. So for the Falcons here with today's game and the 4 games after that, I would say that there could possibly be 3-2, 2-3 over the next 5 weeks. I'll have firm predictions week to week for each of these games, but today I'm taking them to beat the or the Washington Commanders, excuse me. On the flip side, as far as the Commanders schedule, again, after today, they'll be at the New York Giants October 22nd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're home against the Philadelphia Eagles October 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're at New England Patriots 1 p.m. Eastern on November 5th on Fox. Then they're at the Seattle Seahawks November 12th. That game is 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So Washington, they're obviously to me better than the Giants, so I could see them winning that game next week. The Eagles, they played them tough back in week 4. They lost by a field goal in overtime, and this time they'll have the home advantage. But Philadelphia, still the better team. It's just that Washington, they play their opponents tough in their division. That's why I'm giving them the win over the Giants. With the Eagles, we'll have to see. I could see them stealing that game, but Philly's probably going to be favorites since it's the Philadelphia Eagles, even though Washington's at home. So I'll have a prediction for you a couple weeks out from now on that game. At the New England Patriots, November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern. That game, that's not a far travel for them at all. So the way New England is playing right now, I could see them taking that game. New England is not a good team at all, and I could see Washington getting the better of them at that game. And at the Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle's the better team, and also because of the traveling aspect, I could see that being a tougher game for them. So I could see Seattle winning that game by a possession, like a 28-20 type score. So give me Seattle to win that game. So like I said, the Commanders sit at 2-3 now with today's game coming up here at 1 p.m. Eastern. So um, they could be about 3-2. With losing today, I could see them winning a couple of their games after that. The Philadelphia game is that's going to be interesting. Like I said, Philadelphia is the better team, but they play their opponents tougher. So I'll have a firm prediction for you on that one. So 3-2, 2-3 is the forecast for the next 5 games for them. They'll still be in the mix for a wild card position probably, but Philadelphia at 5-0, they're kind of at a disadvantage already by 3 games. If Philadelphia slips up any kind of way over the next couple of games, that'll open the door for them and Dallas, who's ahead of them by a game. But Philadelphia looks like a good team, a solid team right now, and they'll definitely be in the mix. They're probably the second best team in the NFC outside of the 49ers obviously being the best. They're the only team that's above Philly in the NFC at this time right now. I'm switching gears. The next game we're going to talk about is going to be the Chicago Bears hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Each team is 1-4, and they share the bottom of the NFC North. This game is going to be interesting. This is the first game Justin Jefferson is going to miss with him being placed on IR. So you can expect the wide receivers KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison to be the starters at wide receiver for these teams, and they're going to definitely get a lot more targets and possibly more receptions thrown their way. But TJ Hawkinson, the tight end, he's going to be the guy that benefits the most from Justin Jefferson being out, and he's going to definitely get a lot of catches on today. I expect catches from him. Kirk Cousins has 13 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, so he's having a statistically great year, but as a team, they just haven't been able to get wins. So that's going to be a huge story with them not having Justin Jefferson. On the flip side, for the Chicago Bears, they got some injury issues of their own. Khalil Herbert, he has a high ankle sprain, and he was already doubtful for this game, but he was placed on IR, so he's going to be out. And his backup running back, Rashawn Johnson, he's inactive for today's game because he couldn't pass concussion protocol. So he's going to be out for this game also. So the Bears are very thin at running back. So Justin Fields is probably going to be the running back for this team, and that's been the case already. So it's going to be a rough day for Chicago. I think even with Minnesota not having Justin Jefferson, I'm going to take the Justin Jefferson list Vikings to win by 10 points, roughly. I can see them winning and Hawkinson getting a couple of touchdowns. That's the expectation, but we'll just have to see how that goes. The Bears are not that great on defense. And we saw what the Denver Broncos could do to them a couple weeks ago, and the Broncos aren't that great. So the Bears, yeah, I'm taking the Vikings here. The Vikings will improve. I would be shocked if the Vikings lost this game even without Justin Jefferson, but I do expect Justin Jefferson's absence to affect them in these future games because, for example, they have a Monday Night Football matchup next Monday on October 23rd against the San Francisco 49ers. They'll be at home, but they're going to need that offense, and they're not going to have it. So I got San Francisco winning that game. They're at the Green Bay Packers 6 days later at 1 p.m. Eastern, October 29th. They're at the Atlanta Falcons November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. And then they're home against the New Orleans Saints November 12th on Fox. That's also at 1 p.m. Eastern as well. So Minnesota wins today, but the San Francisco one is a loss. Unfortunately, they're not going to be able to go toe to toe with the 49ers on offense or defense. Plain and simple. So I got the Niners winning that game. At Green Bay is very interesting. That's an interesting game because Green Bay is a bit of an enigma, more so due to personnel, more so than injury. David Bakhtiari, the left tackle, he hasn't been available for them all season. He's going to miss the rest of the season, so that's not something that they've really had to rely on at all anyway. So looking back here, I could see the Green Bay Packers. I could see this being a close game with Green Bay squeaking by simply because they're at home. Justin Jefferson is he's just a huge part of the offense for the Minnesota Vikings, and they've had to backpedal a lot of that because of him being missing. So I'm gonna take Green Bay close because of that aspect. At the Atlanta Falcons, I could see Minnesota winning that game because Kirk Cousins, he's automatically the better quarterback over Desmond Ritter. And he's also said that he's not waiving his no trade clause for anybody, so he's going to be the quarterback there. That speculation was pretty much deaded when he said that, so that's out. So he'll be there, and he'll barring injury, I think he'll be the guy that plays the better game against Desmond Ritter, and they'll win that game. And at home against the New Orleans Saints, I could see them squeaking by and winning that game as well due to the home aspect. The Saints, to me, have been very meh because of a couple things. Allan Kamara was suspended the first few games, so he's still kind of getting his legs under him. And Derek Carr, he's been all right. He hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been amazing, and he hasn't really shown flashes of brilliance that they're looking for yet at that quarterback position. They're still trying to fill that position since Drew Brees retired a couple years ago. So I would take Minnesota in that game too. So me personally, the only losses I'm looking at over the next 5 games for Minnesota would be San Francisco and Green Bay. I could see them losing those games, so they would still be 3-2, most likely again over the next few weeks. And then with the Chicago Bears here after today, here looking at their schedule, um, I just don't know where the wins are going to come from. Even home against the Raiders, that doesn't really scream win. because the Raiders, as average as they are and as plain as they can be, they still have a couple of victories. They got their victory over Green Bay on Monday Night Football last week, and that game was more to do with defense because Max Crosby went crazy and sacked Jordan Love to death. So that's what's going to win that game for the Minnesota or the Las Vegas Raiders, excuse me, over the Bears. The Bears on October 29th are at the Los Angeles Chargers, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And the following week, they're at the New Orleans Saints, November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So, like I said, it's hard to see where the wins come from, except for that Carolina game I just stated on Thursday Night Football. They're home against that team, and then also Carolina, they're the only winless team left in the NFL. So who knows if they'll have any wins about by that time. So give me the Bears to squeak by. Justin Fields and Bryce Young, those are two young quarterbacks going at it, but Fields has the experience and he's shown he has more weaponry with running the football. So that's the only reason I would take the Bears to win that game. But over the next 4 weeks after that, I just don't see where the wins come from the Bears. And like I've stated many times, they're going to be picking at the top of the NFL draft. And if they finish with the worst record, they would have the number one pick and the number two pick in the NFL draft. The Denver Broncos are going to have something to say about that based on the way they play down the stretch, as is a few other teams. You know, the Patriots, they're a 1-4 football team. There's a lot of teams down at the bottom here that are possibly playing for those picks here. So we'll just have to see. The Cardinals are 1-4. Giants are 1-4. Do they have their quarterbacks? Those last couple of teams, you know, with the Giants, they're not drafting another quarterback. They just signed Jones to a lot of money. But with the Cardinals, is Kyler Murray going to be your guy? They still don't know. So a lot of questions. Switching gears here, we're going to talk about another matchup here occurring here. This is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals hosting the Seattle Seahawks. That game is taking place on CBS in your local markets. Cincinnati is favored by 3 points, which is a field goal. And looking at this game here, Joe Burrow finally had a solid game last week here against the Arizona Cardinals. And Jamar Chase, he ate. He ate and he ate and he ate, and he set a franchise record and a career high record on his own personal merit for catches in a game with 15 catches last week. So I'm not seeing any way that Seattle beats this team unless they can negate that pass. If they can put any kind of pass rush on Burrow and make him throw the ball in inopportune fashion, that's the way I could see Seattle winning this game. They are coming off of a bye week as well. So they'll be fresh on their way to Cincinnati, and that'll help them a bit. But, you know, Cincinnati finally looked good. That's what I'm saying there. And as far as this game goes, as far as who I'm going to take, you know, Cincinnati, even though they're back, there's still more I want to see. T. Higgins said he's playing. He has a fractured rib, and he did miss a game earlier in the year. But he's not. He said he's going to be out there. He's going to be playing today. So if Jamar Chase and T. Higgins can get going, and Joe Mixon can provide anything, that crowd in Seattle is going to get behind them and keep that momentum going. So I do like Seattle close. I like them close in a high-scoring affair. I would say like 34-31 in that regard. If Cincinnati or Seattle, like I said, if they want to steal this game, they got to play their own offense as well and get DK Metcalf going. But also that pass rush has to get going to make Joe Burrow uncomfortable. That's going to be the key for Seattle today. As far as Cincinnati goes, following today, they'll have their bye week next week for week 7. They won't have a game next week. The following week, they're at the San Francisco 49ers, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, October 29th on CBS. Then they're home against the Buffalo Bills November 5th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern for Sunday Night Football on NBC. Then home for the Houston Texans November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they travel to Baltimore for a Thursday Night Football matchup here on November 16th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. So, like I said, I'm taking Cincinnati close. Heading into their bye week, they'll need that win. That'll give them a 2-game winning streak at the San Francisco 49ers is going to be very tough. That offensive line will need to hold up for Joe Burrow because that pass rush is coming. That pass rush is definitely coming for him. So that game, I'm going to have a prediction closer to that, but I'm definitely leaning San Fran. Home against Buffalo, that's going to be interesting too because that game is based on they take the division winners and they all at some point play each other within the season in each conference. So that game right there is going to be that game is going to determine who has a chance for the top seed. Like I said, I favor Kansas City right now, But that game will put this either team in position to be right there to either take Kansas City's crown or be just under for possibly the 2 seed. That's what this game is gonna be to me is playoff seeding. So Cincinnati and Buffalo is gonna be huge. Home against Houston, I have no reason to take Houston until I see more from them a few weeks here out as far as their games, but I'm gonna take Cincinnati tentatively. And at Baltimore is where things get tricky because, like I said, divisional matchups here can be very tough. So at Baltimore, I'll have a firm prediction for you when that Thursday night game comes, but I could see Cincinnati going in there and taking it close. Baltimore, to me, has been very ebby and flowy. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. So I just won't know what they'll be in that 5 to 6 week period. So Cincinnati to me could be a 3-2 team, and they could be even 4-1 if things get to clicking and firing on all cylinders as they want them to. They had a very slow start, but they could possibly have a strong finish. This is kind of what they've been the last couple of years. They've started 2-3, 3-2 before, and rode it to a Super Bowl and to an AFC Championship game in each of those seasons, respectively. So Cincinnati, with that win today and going into a bye week, that'll be much needed for that football team. As far as the Seattle Seahawks here today, with me picking them to lose, looking at their few games after that, they'll be home against the Arizona Cardinals October 22nd, and that's going to be at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're home again the following week against the Cleveland Browns. That'll be October 29th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. Then they're traveling cross country to visit the Baltimore Ravens November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before heading back home to face the Washington Commanders at November 12th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So even with a loss at at the Cincinnati Bengals, I can still see this team being 3-2 over their next 5 games. Just prognosticating and looking at things. The Seattle Seahawks, to me, are fighting for a wild card spot. They're not going to win their division unless there's just a huge misstep by San Francisco over the course of the schedule. And they don't even actually see the San Francisco 49ers head to head until late November and early December. So they won't even have any kind of like impact on their schedule at all head to head until the later games in the year. Things happen week to week with injury, roster, things of that nature. So football, the nature of the sport and it being the way it is. So looking that far out, you'll say San Francisco will win those games right now, but again, things can happen. Um, it doesn't also help that they have the Dallas Cowboys squeezed in between their San Francisco games as well. So, like I said, that's going to be tough on Seattle, but things happen. So, over the course of the next 5 weeks, I could see them being 3-2, but 2-3 is not out of the question either, just because of the divisional matchups that Seattle has coming up as well. I'm switching gears here. Another matchup we're going to talk about here. The Cleveland Browns are hosting the San Francisco 49ers. The Browns are 2-2 coming off of a bye week. And the 49ers are 5-0 with their dominant victory over the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football last week. The Browns are not going to have Deshaun Watson. He's actually going to be out for this game here today. So they're actually starting PJ Walker at quarterback. They tried with the rookie Dorian Thompson, but it did not work out for Cleveland whatsoever as far as that went. Dorian Thompson Robinson was his name, excuse me. He was the starter in that game, and he didn't get a touchdown at all. So they're not going to go with him. They're going to go with PJ Walker, he has slightly more experience. He started games for the Bears and for the Panthers previously before coming to Cleveland. So it makes sense to go with him in that regard because the rookie still has some more work to do as far as getting the playbook down and getting what he needs acclimated. On the flip side, the Niners are they're a steamroller right now. They're just smashing, they're hitting the teams that they need to in the mouth, and they're just establishing their dominance early. I like them to win this game by double digits. They're favored by 9.5 in Vegas, but that's just the over under. That's just a parameter that they set. I can see this game being a 2 touchdown or more win because with them having PJ Walker at quarterback, that's going to diminish the value of what Cooper can do for you at wide receiver. He only has 1 touchdown on the season. Jerome Ford, he's been in place of Nick Chubb at the running back position, and they also have Kareem Hunt back in the fold. But I just don't know if that'll be enough to keep pace with the Niners on offense or defense. So give me the Niners in this win today. I just don't see Cleveland taking this game unless the Niners just absolutely forget how to play football. The Niners then travel to Minnesota for Monday Night Football the following week, October 23rd at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. 6 days later, they're home against the Cincinnati Bengals, and that's 4:25 p.m. Eastern, October 29th. They then have a bye week after that before they travel to Jacksonville. That's November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers November 19th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. So I don't see where the loss is. I mentioned Cincinnati earlier. That may be a tougher game for them, possibly. But I see them winning that football game heading into their bye week. And that bye week, it comes at a perfect time for them because it's week 9. So that's pretty much right in the middle of the season. They'll have 8 games under their belt with 8 more to go. And traveling to Jacksonville and home against Tampa, I don't see those being issues either. The only thing that can really stop the Niners is the Niners. If they have injuries that affect them at all, or if they have a situation where there's just bad play, that's what's going to affect them. But the Niners are on a roll. They're on a roll towards that 1 seed in their conference. As far as the Cleveland Browns go, at 2-2, it's just kind of a mystery to me what's going on here with Deshaun Watson because they stated a couple of weeks prior. They had a bye week last week, but for the Baltimore game, they stated he could have played, but he just didn't play. He was structurally like able to play according to their training staff, but he didn't play. So Dorian Thompson Robinson went out there and got eaten up. He had 3 interceptions in that game. So I don't know what the deal is with Deshaun Watson, but the sources are saying he could return next week against the Indianapolis Colts, but who knows? Who knows? They're at Indianapolis at 1 p.m. Eastern on the 22nd. Then they're at Seattle October 29th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're home against the Arizona Cardinals November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Baltimore November 12th for a 1 p.m. Eastern matchup on Fox. So the Browns, to me, they've won one, they lost one, they won one, they lost one. That's how their season has gone prior to the bye week last week. So I expect a loss today, but at Indianapolis, they could win that game, depending on how the defense plays here. With Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson was placed on IR with his shoulder injury, and he's going to miss a minimum of 4 games, so he won't be available for that game. And I can see Cleveland taking that game. Gardner Minshew is going to be starting in Indianapolis's place. So he'll know what to do with them being at home. He knows the weapons he has, but Cleveland's defense on the front line is what's gonna be the key for them. At Seattle, I'm taking Seattle at the moment because of the cross country travel. The Deshaun Watson may be available. We'll have to see. And at the same time, the travel I think is going to affect them. But I think Seattle is the better team. That's what I'm going off of at this current time. I'll have a more firm prediction at that time for you. And then home against Arizona, that's a divisional matchup. Or I'm sorry, that's a matchup here where they're home, but Arizona is traveling to them. Arizona, to me, has been a very scrappy team, and they've shown a lot of fight, but they just don't have weapons in place. And with the Browns, I could see that being a matchup that's more of a pick 'em than any team or one or the other dominating. And then with them being at Baltimore the following week, that's a divisional matchup, and I just don't know who to take for that game either, even though they're traveling, because Baltimore hasn't really dominated the way they should have yet. The way that they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple weeks ago was just to me a situation where that defense told Lamar Jackson what to do as opposed to him taking over the game. So looking at their schedule, the Cleveland Browns, they could be 2-3, but if they get play where they need to and they play a little better than above expectations, they could be 3-2. Because again, things happen from week to week, so we'll just have to see what happens at that time for them. But I expect the 49ers to roll today. I don't expect any kind of upset of any kind simply because of the fact that the quarterback play and the other personnel missing for them is just not there. All right, the next game here we're going to switch gears to and talk about here is taking place at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami as the Dolphins host the Carolina Panthers. They're favored by 14 points to win that game. 14 points, that's 2 touchdowns. And to be honest with you, I can see it. I honestly can see it. This is a matchup of former Alabama quarterbacks here with Tua Tagovailoa's Dolphins and Bryce Young's winless Panthers. And to me, as we stated before here, with running back for the Miami Dolphins, Devin Achan being placed on IR, they're going to be relying more on Raheem Mostert. Jeff Wilson, he's still on IR and he's still not going to be active for this game. So Raheem Mostert is going to get the start for the Dolphins. Devin Achan, excuse me, he showed a lot of promise here, and I definitely think he's going to be the man of the future for them. But with him being placed on IR here alongside Jeff Wilson, the backup running back is going to be Chris Brooks behind Raheem Mostert. So we'll have to see what he does here on the football field. But you still have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at wide receiver. You know what I mean? You still have those guys doing what they do. So as long as you have them going, and if Raheem Mostert can do anything, I'm taking the Dolphins to win this football game. The Carolina Panthers, as I've stated many times, they're playing for draft position at this current point. There's still more pieces that they need. But Adam Thielen, he's been terrific for the Carolina Panthers. He's easily Bryce Young's favorite target. Of the 5 touchdowns he's thrown, 3 of them have been to Thielen. So he's definitely one of his favorite target, for sure. Miles Sanders, he's actually inactive for this game here today, and he'll be out for the Carolina Panthers here. He's suffering from a shoulder injury, and he's going to be out for this game here. There was talk that he was possibly going to play here, but he wasn't able to practice this week, and he's already dealt with groin injuries and pectoral injuries as well to go along with that shoulder injury. So Chuba Hubbard is going to get the start for the Carolina Panthers, and he's going to get most of the carries probably going forward. And Sanders will probably return to Carolina after their week 7 bye. They have a bye next week. So he'll probably return to the team in 2 weeks. So that's probably why they held him out of today's game. But give me the Miami Dolphins to roll. I just don't really like Carolina's offense as well. And their defense, you have a couple guys here and there, but as a whole, they're just not that solid. So give me the Dolphins to roll over the Panthers here today. The Dolphins, looking at their schedule over the course of the next few weeks after today's game, they'll be at the Philadelphia Eagles, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC, October 22nd for Sunday Night Football. Then they're home the next few weeks here, technically speaking. They're home against the New England Patriots, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 29th on CBS. Then they play against the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, that game's taking place November 5th, 9:30 a.m. Eastern in Germany. Then they have their bye week following that. Then they're home against the Las Vegas Raiders November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So Philly and Kansas City, those are going to be trouble. But Carolina, New England, and Vegas, those are wins for the Dolphins. All those games are at home as well. So those are wins for the Dolphins. At Philly is going to be the probably more difficult game because, like I said, with Kansas City on November 5th, no team has a decided advantage because that's an international game. Each team is going to be in Germany. So, because of the non-advantage, either way, that game is going to be closer to a pick 'em, and I'll probably have a more firm prediction for that game. But at Philly is definitely going to be tough. They'll have everybody firing on all cylinders to win that game, and the loss of Devin Achane is going to be huge because they're not going to have him for that game. So, I'm leaning towards Philly. If it was a situation where they were fully healthy, I would lean towards Miami close, but I'm probably taking Philly for that game, and I'll have a firm prediction for you next Sunday. Today they got they got the Carolina victory for sure, and I think over the next 5 games they could be 3-2, 4-1 optimistically if they can take care of business against either Philly or KC. If they can steal one of those games, that will put them at 4-1 in my opinion, as long as they don't drop any of those other 3 at home. So that'll be huge. That'll definitely be huge for the Dolphins. And like I said here, as far as the conference and looking at the conference as a whole, they're probably up there with Kansas City as far as best teams in the conference. When I look at the AFC, it looks like it's Kansas City and then Miami Buffalo, and that's the 1-2 position. Buffalo beat Miami, so I'm going to naturally put them just ahead, and then just below them, who knows? Because Baltimore hasn't really shown me enough to lock them in that 4 spot in the AFC. Baltimore, they're just kind of very up and down. I know they're winning right now, but they just have a couple of befuddling losses to me. So we'll just have to see what Baltimore pans out as. But the top 3 teams in the AFC are the Chiefs, Bills, and Dolphins right now, in my opinion. So the Dolphins, like I said, 3-2, optimistically 4-1 over their next 5 games. So Carolina, looking at their schedule after today here, they'll be 0-6 based on what happens today heading into their bye week. Then they'll be home their next couple of games here against the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts, respectively. The Texans game will be on October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, and the game against the Colts will be 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They have a Thursday night game at the Chicago Bears, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, November 9th, right after that, on Amazon Prime. Then 10 days later, they host the Dallas Cowboys November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to Tennessee to visit the Titans November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, yeah, after today's game here, they'll have a bye week and then they'll have the Houston Texans. That'll be two rookie quarterbacks going at it with CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. CJ Stroud hasn't thrown any interceptions yet, so he's been mistake free, even though he hasn't been that dynamic. I feel like he's working through things as far as the offense and getting it on the pro level. Bryce Young has made more mistakes, but I feel like he also has slightly less to work with in a sense than in Houston with CJ Stroud because you have Nico Collins and Tank Dell playing pretty solid at wide receiver. They're young receivers, but they've been playing really well. And as far as their defense goes, they're starting to get it together. Will Anderson was a high draft pick for Houston, just like CJ Stroud was. And so with Houston, I could see them coming into Carolina and taking that game. They'll steal it close if they do take it. The Indianapolis Colts hosting the Colts. I got the Colts in that game as well, simply because the Colts have better players and they have better personnel. They're an up and down, pretty average team as well, but they're still better than the Panthers. The game at Chicago, that's going to be interesting because that's a quick turnaround for each team. And because Chicago is hosting that game, I would take Chicago to win. I would take Chicago to win, and then 10 days later, I'm taking the Cowboys to win that game as well. It's hard to see where the wins come from for this team. I stated in a previous broadcast that I thought this team would be 3-14, roughly 4-13 at best. But it's still hard to see where the wins come from. You could get a couple of wins later in the season. You could steal a game here in the next few weeks. But with Carolina, they're playing for a high draft pick. I just don't see a situation where they win their division or they dominate any of these teams down the stretch. There could be an outlier that happens in the next few weeks, but we'll just have to see. Quick update here. The Baltimore Ravens are leading the Tennessee Titans 24-13 with 1:21 left in the game. That game's going to be closing out here shortly. And it looks like Baltimore is going to win. I'll give you a final again before I close out, but Baltimore's extended their lead and they're looking to win this game and close things out here. Another game we're going to talk about here, switching gears and going back to another preview. The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be hosting the Indianapolis Colts. That game is taking place here at Everbank Stadium as Jacksonville finally is back on United States soil. Their last two games were in England, and they won both of them, fortunately, to improve to 3-2. So looking at this game here, we're definitely going to see a situation where the AFC South is going to kind of be moved around a bit. All these teams are kind of sitting in the same spot. Jacksonville and Indianapolis are each 3-2. And Houston and Tennessee are each 2-3. Tennessee could be falling to 2-4 here in a bit, so we'll have to see. But this division by no means is defined by any one team. I thought it was Jacksonville's division to lose, but Indianapolis has hung around. The Colts have lost 8 straight road games to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but the Colts are perfect on the road this year. They beat Houston in Houston, and they beat Baltimore in Baltimore. So their losses are actually at home. They're 1-2 at home. So the Jacksonville Jaguars, interesting enough, are 1-2 at home as well. So this is a divisional matchup, so things could go either way, and that's kind of how divisional matchups are, depending on the matchup and the two teams that we're talking about. Jacksonville is favored by 4 to win this football game, so that would be like a 31-27 final score, or possibly better, depending on what numbers you're looking at. And I, in my opinion, think Jacksonville, even though they're coming from England after being over there 2 weeks, I still think they can win this game. If Indianapolis steals it, it's a situation where they just had dynamic play at one particular position, possibly running the footballs where I could see that happening. Because you're going to have Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Jonathan Taylor returned last week, and you're going to have both of those backs in the field here. So if Indianapolis can run the ball and get both of those guys going, that's going to keep the clock moving and make things tough for Jacksonville and also keep their offense off the field. But I'm still leaning towards Jacksonville to win this football game today. I'm looking at their schedule after that. They have a Thursday night matchup here coming up here just on the 19th on Amazon Prime at the New Orleans Saints at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. 10 days later, they're at the Pittsburgh Steelers, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 29th on CBS. Then they have their bye week after that for week 9. So that'll kind of keep things balanced, excuse me, balanced for them because they'll have played 8 games, a bye week, and they'll have 8 games left. Now, they will be home against the San Francisco 49ers coming off of that bye week, November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. But then they'll be home against the Tennessee Titans, November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So that'll kind of even that out for them. With their victory today, I'm taking again the Jacksonville Jaguars close over the Colts today. And coming up on Thursday at the Saints with that quick turnaround for each team, they're going to be back on the road again in a sense after just coming back from England. So I think that the Saints can take advantage of them because of the fact that they're hosting them. I think the Saints can take advantage of that game. And then going to Pittsburgh again, another road game for them. To me, that's a situation where Pittsburgh is going to win that game with defense the same way they beat Baltimore last week. That they kept Lamar Jackson in check. And I can foresee a similar performance against Trevor Lawrence here in that game, October 29th. So give me Pittsburgh at this time. Again, things happen week to week. So I'll have an official prediction for you, but that's what I'm forecasting and what I see heading into their bye week is a couple of losses. Home against the 49ers is not going to be any good either. The Niners, I picked that as a win, and I'm going to stick with that, barring some sort of injury or barring some sort of underachievement on their part. Home against the Tennessee Titans, that'll be their first matchup of the season with the Titans. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they close out the season against the Titans as well. And to me, that game is an AFC South matchup where there's going to be a heavyweight slug out in a sense. And looking at that matchup here, I can see Jacksonville taking that because they have the better quarterback play with Tannehill for Tennessee. I think obviously Trevor Lawrence is a better player, and if Tennessee if Tennessee wants to win this game, they're going to need to run the football really well with Derrick Henry. That's the only way they'll spell that game. So for me, Jacksonville, I could see them being 3-2, 2-3 over the next 5 games. It's kind of a toss up with the way their schedule looks. But I'm taking them today to defeat the Indianapolis Colts close. Looking at the Colts schedule, conversely, if they lose this game today, that would drop them to 3-3. They're home against the Cleveland Browns next week on October 22nd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before also hosting the Saints October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they travel to Carolina to visit the Panthers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 5th. Then they have their own international game here November 12th against the New England Patriots, and that'll take place in Germany at Frankfurt Stadium, November 12th, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm sorry, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, November 12th, and that's going to be on the NFL Network. The Colts, I'm still taking them over the Patriots. I would take them to win the Patriots game and those Panthers games to kick off November. But I could see these next few games being a loss. I got them losing today close. Home against Cleveland is intriguing because we'll need to know what the status is of Watson. If Watson plays that game and they play well at all on offense, I could see Cleveland giving the Browns a loss in that game. But that's kind of a pick 'em too because Cleveland, they're very up and down. They would depend on their defense making things tough for Gardner Minshew that day. Home against the Saints for the Indianapolis Colts, that's a win also. But I say that with trepidation because if Derek Carr can have any kind of performance where he connects with his receivers and gets Kamara going, they could steal that game. So I'll come back to that game as we get closer to that game in a couple weeks. But they could steal that game. The Colts could if they play well because they're at home. I'm at Carolina, and again against the New England Patriots. I got those as wins because those are two of the bottom teams, the Panthers and Patriots this year. So over the next 5 weeks, I can see the Indianapolis Colts being 2-3, at worst 1-4, due to the next couple of games they got. Because again, Cleveland could steal that game if they play defense. So we just got to see how these things go week to week, and I'll have a firm prediction for you next week for that game. The next game we're going to talk about here is the Houston Texans. Here they're going to be hosting the New Orleans Saints. This is the last of the 1 p.m. Eastern games taking place here today. The New Orleans Saints are favored by 2.5 in Vegas, so that's essentially a field goal. And looking at this game here, the Texans have been very up and down because they've shown that they can blow teams out with the way they played against the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple weeks ago. But on the flip side, the Saints, they got some ball in them too. They destroyed the Patriots last week. So CJ Stroud is looking to build against on that success against that secondary with the Saints. That Saints secondary is tough, and they ate Mac Jones up last week. As far as who to take here, give me the Saints close. I like the line and I like the over under as well here. The over under for this game is actually going to be pretty high as well at 42 points. So I like that. I'd like each team to score at least 20 points today plus, but give me the Saints close. I would say they win this game like 24-20, something like that. CJ Stroud, he hasn't thrown any interceptions here, and if that's what the Saints want to do, it's going to be with that secondary and with that push up front. That's how they're going to make this game interesting and make things tough on CJ Stroud. And if Derek Carr does a little bit on offense, that's what's going to be the key for this team. So give me the Saints to win this game here close. I don't expect a blowout by either team. It is a quick turnaround here for the Saints. I just touched on this game a bit ago with Jacksonville Jaguars. Their schedule, they're going to be traveling to the Saints to visit them October 19th on Prime. The following week at Indianapolis, the Saints will be traveling October 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're home against the Chicago Bears, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Minnesota to visit the Vikings, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 12th on Fox before they head into their bye week. So naturally, with the Saints, I naturally just have trepidation as to what they are because through 5 games, they have a couple of victories. They have the impressive victory over the Patriots last week, but that's the Patriots. If you blow a team like Jacksonville out 34-0, that's going to raise eyebrows more. But we've already been talking about how bad the Patriots have been this year. They squeaked by the Jets, but have lost every other game. So the Saints, if they really want to prove something here today, I think it happens with the next couple of games. If you can beat Houston today and you can go home and get a victory over Jacksonville, 2 games within a calendar week, that'll really improve your position, not only in your division, but as far as the conference. I'm not sure if you'll be a division winner, but it'll definitely put you on that path. I'm traveling to Indy. I touched on this game a little bit with Indianapolis' schedule, but give me the Saints actually, just because with the Colts, they're not going to have Anthony Richardson available, and it'll really depend on the running game for the Indianapolis Colts to help with Gardner Minshew because Gardner Minshew doesn't immediately scare you, but that two-back system that the Colts can get going, that will scare you. As far as the Bears, they're down there with the Panthers as one of the worst teams in football. So I'm going to take the Saints at this time to win that game. Then at Minnesota is also going to be interesting because of Justin Jefferson. There's a possibility he may miss that game as well. So we'll just have to see because that game is about 5 weeks away, and they're saying 4 to 6 in Minnesota's case. So we'll just have to see. But the Saints, they could be a 3-2 football team here over the next 5 games, but week to week things happen, and I'll just have to pick those games for you and just see where they lie. The Texans, on the flip side here, after today, they'll be at the Carolina Panthers following their bye week. They don't have a game next week after today. And they'll be at the Carolina Panthers October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They'll be hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Cincinnati November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they'll be home against the Arizona Cardinals November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Like I said, they got a schedule because they could beat Carolina and they could beat the Cardinals, but they could lose to Tampa and they could lose at Cincinnati. Houston is very up and down. They've showed a lot of promise with their rookies that they have, specifically C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, and then Nathaniel Dell. But on the flip side, Tampa and Cincinnati are the better teams, plain and simple. So this looks like a clear-cut 3-2, but nothing is really clear-cut in the NFL. And like I said, things happen from week to week, and so I'll have a prediction for you as that game gets closer here. The games we're not going to talk about, these are all afternoon games here, these next few games here. The Las Vegas Raiders are hosting the Patriots, and that game takes place at 4:05 p.m. on CBS. The Raiders improved to 2-3 with their victory on Monday Night Football over the Packers, and the Patriots fell to 1-4 with that blowout they took at the hands of the Saints last week. The Patriots have lost 70. Lost their 2 games by a score of 72-3 combined over those 2 games. And this game today, um, There's a lot of similarities between these teams. The obvious ones being a lot of people that used to be in the Patriots organization now with the Raiders. Josh McDaniels, the general manager, Jacoby Myers, the wide receiver. He came over from the Patriots. Jimmy Garoppolo, he spent a lot of time in the Patriots system before going to the Niners in his career. Just a lot of similarities between the two teams. Each team is sitting near the bottom of the division or at the bottom of their division. The Patriots are 1-4, and the Raiders are 2-3. This game to me is a pick 'em just because each team is struggling. Even with the Raiders being 2-3, they haven't been convincing victories. The teams that they've beaten are the Denver Broncos to start the year, and then Jordan Love threw 3 picks, but they still were only able to beat the Raiders by 4. Or I'm sorry, the Packers by 4. So this Raiders game, I'm going to take the Raiders just due to the simple fact that the Patriots are not a good team. They're just flat out bad this year, and I just don't see it getting any better for them. So I'm going to take the Raiders to win this game, but it's not going to be a high-scoring shootout by any means. The Raiders will be at Chicago next week, October 22nd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they have a Monday Night Football game at Detroit, October 30th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. They're home against the New York Giants, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, November 5th on Fox. Then home against the New York Jets for Monday or Sunday Night Football, November 12th, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Ugh. I highly doubt that Raiders Jets game stays a Sunday Night Football game because that's going to be at the Week 10 or further point when they can start flexing games. And I ain't keeping the Raiders Jets as a prime time game. That is garbage. That is garbage. They're gonna flex that game. That's my prediction. So we'll just have to see if the Raiders Jets play Sunday Night Football November 12th. But my prediction is they flex that game out and put a better, more intriguing game in that spot. With that being said, those last couple of games here, the Raiders they could be 4-1 over their next 5 games because if they win today, then they're at Chicago. They could win that game. They're not I don't see them beating Detroit at Detroit October 30th for Monday Night Football, but the Giants and the Jets, you're hosting both of those teams, and both of those teams just haven't yeah, they could win both of those games. So the Raiders, optimistically, they could be 4-1 over their next 5 games, but they're the Raiders. They could find a way to screw a couple of those games up, realistically. On the flip side here, another with the Patriots, I just don't see where the wins come from after today because you're hosting Buffalo next week at 1 p.m. Eastern of October 22nd on CBS. Then you're at Miami 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS on October 29th. You're home against the Commanders 1 p.m. Eastern November 5th. Then you have the Colts game who are traveling to Germany, so there's no decided advantage against the Colts. I don't see where the wins come. Their best chance is probably today, even though I'm taking the Raiders close. Their best chance is either today or in a few weeks against the Commanders. The Raiders are bad, and I just don't know what they do to fix that. I really don't. After the Colts game down the road, they don't have their bye week until mid-November, so it's going to be tough sledding for the Patriots. It really is. They got some questions they need answered for sure, but that's going to be a tough sled for them. These next few games are taking place here at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. The Rams are hosting the Cardinals. That's going to take place at SoFi Stadium. The Rams are 2-3. The Cardinals are 1-4. To me, this game is going to be a situation where the Rams take it. I feel like the Rams getting back Cooper Cup is what is going to make this offense go. And then you already had 2 wide receivers prove that they can go, and Puka Nakua and Tutu Atwell. That's like your 2 and 3 receivers. They traded Van Jefferson away to the Falcons for a low draft pick in the 2024 draft. So those are your defined receivers right there. And I'm going to take the Rams to win. They're favored by a touchdown in Vegas, and I'll stick by that. The Cardinals are 1-4. They have been scrappy despite their 1-4 record, but they just don't have the pieces in place here. They got beat 34-20 at home by the Bengals last week, and that was Joe Burrow showing that he's back and he's feeling good from that calf injury. So I'm going to take the Rams today here to win this football game. The Rams, to me, they're still kind of getting the training wheels off and kind of getting the rust off the axles a bit. Whereas Arizona, Nobody's really expecting them to do anything. With James Conner being placed on IR as well, that's going to further complicate matters for them because he's not going to be available. So, give me the Rams to win this football game to improve to 3-3. The following week, they're home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They'll be hosting them 4:05 p.m. Eastern, October 22nd on Fox. Then they're at the Dallas Cowboys, October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before they head to Green Bay, November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They have a bye week after that. Then they're home against the Seattle Seahawks, November 19th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So I like the Rams to win today, but the Steelers are going to cause them problems. If the Steelers cause them any kind of problems on defense, that's where they're going to be able to win the football game. But if the Rams can get those receivers going, I could see them winning that football game. I'll have a prediction for you next week. At the Dallas Cowboys is going to be tough. That's going to be really tough for the Rams. And we'll just have to see how Dallas's defense is still looking a couple weeks from now because San Francisco exposed them for sure, and a lot of teams are going to be referring to that tape. At the Green Bay Packers heading into their bye week after that. That following week is going to be tough as well because Lambeau Field is a tough place to play, even if the Packers aren't up to par as a team, because you'll be in early November at that point. The weather's gotten colder by then. If the Rams want to win that game, again, it's going to be very similar to Dallas, but they have a better shot with Green Bay because Green Bay's offense has been very up and down. And Aaron Jones, I think he'll be the key because Jordan Love, he's been kind of mistake about a problem this year. So again, I'll have a firm prediction when that game comes. Again, they have a bye week after that before they're home against the Seattle Seahawks, and I can see them winning that game. That's for a ways away. They won the game at Seattle, so Seattle will be looking for revenge, but that's a ways away. So over the next 6 weeks with the bye weeks and with the 5 games that they play, they could probably be about 3-2. We'll just have to see how things shape out on a week to week basis for them. Of the Arizona Cardinals, they're kind of in a similar position as the Bears and the Panthers. They're probably jockeying for position in the draft. And I just don't see them really winning this game today or at Seattle the following week, October 22nd at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They'll be hosting the Baltimore Ravens October 29th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS, but that game is also going to be tough for them as well because on offense they're going to struggle. The defense hasn't really screamed out excellence to me at all. So Baltimore will probably take that game. Arizona then travels to Cleveland November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the Atlanta Falcons November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The Cardinals, they're 1-4 now, and over the next 4 weeks or 5 weeks, excuse me, they could be 1-4 also. Again, with those games, that'll put them at 2-8 on the season. So again, that's draft positioning right there for you. You're not going to the playoffs at 2-8. You're not going to reel off 7 straight wins to get anywhere. And again, this is prognostication, but I never saw Arizona as viable. They had players retire and JJ Watt and AJ Green. You had Kyler Murray out because he had tore in his ACL, and then you released DeAndre Hopkins. I knew this team was not going to be the same. And then to further complicate matters against Cincinnati last week, James Conner got hurt after 6 carries. So that's the breaks. These are the breaks for the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to be a top picking team. They're going to be in the top 5 picking in the draft next year, plain and simple. A game coming up here at 2:20 or 4:25 p.m. Eastern, taking place between the New York Jets. They'll be hosting the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 5-0. That game is taking place at MetLife Stadium. That game has the Philadelphia Eagles favored by 6.5 in Vegas, but I could see them winning by more. They're looking to go 6-0 for the second straight year, but they're going to be missing some pieces on their side of the ball. Here's Darius Slay, their cornerback, and Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle. They're both going to be out with injury. On the flip side, for the New York Jets, Sauce Gardner is out at cornerback with a concussion that he suffered last week against the Broncos. So each team is going to be missing key pieces on the defensive side of the ball. I like the Eagles in this one. The Jets, they took advantage of a Broncos defense that's bad. They're near the bottom in everything, if not at the bottom. So I feel like the Jets took advantage of a defense that was just bad, but they won't have that ability to run the football like that this week. I don't see Brees Hall getting another 177 yards on the ground. I think he'll have an all right day. And Dalvin Cook is going to need to step it up for the Jets if they have any hope of getting the ball going. He's got to do more for them. He just hasn't looked the same for them yet. So we'll just have to see with the Jets. But I'm taking the Eagles to win this to improve to 6-0. That Miami Dolphins matchup that I've touched on a few times here already, I'm leaning towards the Eagles to win that one for Sunday Night Football next Sunday at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. That'll be on the 22nd. I'm leaning towards the Eagles now with the injuries to the Dolphins on offense. The Eagles will be at Washington October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They'll be hosting the Dallas Cowboys the following week at November 5th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox in their first of two matchups. Then they have their bye week before they travel to Kansas City for Monday Night Football on November 20th. That game, I'm going to give you a description on how I feel about that game as we get closer to it, because that's still about a month away. But I could see the Eagles winning their next three games for sure. The Jets, Dolphins, and Washington Commanders. And that would put them at 8-0 before their Dallas game. Now, the Dallas game is going to be intriguing. I don't want to completely sleep on Dallas, but Dallas hasn't shown that they can rumble with the contenders. And if Philly's defense is intact and healthy by then, they're going to give Dak Prescott problems. So we're going to give that another couple of weeks here, depending on how each team looks. But I'm leaning towards the Eagles game before they have their bye week. The Eagles can head into their bye week at 9-0 before they travel to Kansas City. So that's going to be huge for them. They're jockeying for conference position with the Niners at the top, and they want that one seed. So they have to win those games if they want to keep pace. As far as the Jets go after today, they'll have their bye week next week for week 7. They won't have a game next week after today's game. They have a road game at the New York Giants October 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They share a stadium, so that's a road game in theory. They're just going to have Giant stuff everywhere instead of Jet stuff, basically. They have a Monday Night Football game against the Los Angeles Chargers November 6th, and that's at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC before they travel to Las Vegas for Sunday Night Football, 8:20 p.m. Eastern, November 12th on NBC. As I stated, that game might get flexed out because each of these teams are bad, so we'll have to see if that maintains its spot as far as the date and time. On November 19th, they're at the Buffalo Bills, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS, and I'm going to call that a loss as well. So the Jets are 2-3, and they needed that win against Denver last week to kind of get them off of that losing streak. They had a 3-game losing streak heading into Denver. But I don't see them winning today. Heading into their bye week, they're probably going to want to get things addressed. It is week 7, so that's further enough in the season to answer the question that you need to as to what you're going to be as a team for the Jets. And the Giants game, I could see them winning that game. It'll depend on the availability of Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, but the Jets could win that game. I've kind of changed my tune on that because I said that the Giants would have the better quarterback on the field, but that's a wash. The Daniel Jones isn't that much better than Zach Wilson. So he's just getting paid like it. So we'll just have to see with that game. The Chargers game, I'm going to say a loss. That they're going to be losing that football game. And at the Vegas Raiders, again, depending on the time, if that stays a Sunday night football game, I'm going to call that a loss as well. The Buffalo Bills, that's a loss too. At Buffalo, they're not going to win that game. So over the next 5 weeks, the Giants game is the only game that screams that they could win that game over the next 5 to 6 weeks with the bye week included. So if you're the Jets, you're probably going to be picking high again in the draft, possibly in the top 10. I don't know if you'll be as bad as Chicago, as bad as the Panthers, the Vikings, teams like that, but they'll be in that realm. So I just don't expect the Jets to be a playoff contender this year, and this will be their 12th straight season of not going to the playoffs. With them bringing in Aaron Rodgers, they expected to fix that, but just not the case. On the last game we're going to talk about of the afternoon here, that's the Buccaneers hosting the Lions. That game will be taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. The Buccaneers are coming off of a bye week. The Lions are 4-1, and they're actually favored by 3, even though they're heading to Tampa. And I could see that being a possibility. We'll have to see if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can keep things headed in the right direction coming off of a bye week. And the Lions have looked wonderful so far. They've looked great and they've looked solid in every game. The loss that they took in overtime to Seattle, that was more of Seattle playing above their skis, more so than them being a bad team. And they haven't lost since. They've reeled off 3 straight wins in a row since losing that game at home to Seattle. So I like the Lions as well. Tampa Bay is playing really well. Baker Mayfield has 7 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions so far. So he's playing really well for this team. He hasn't replaced Tom Brady by any means yet. He hasn't won a division or anything or won a Super Bowl, but he's on his way. That division, like I said, is very muddled, and they lead it at this current time with Atlanta and New Orleans and Carolina's games all to be decided this week. But Tampa Bay, I'm gonna say that they lose this game. Even with Baker Mayfield playing the way he has, Detroit's just a better team in the pass game and the run game. Um, Mike Evans has 3 touchdowns and he's connected really well with Baker Mayfield, but Detroit is just they're just a more solid team as a whole, and that's why I got them winning this football game today here. After today's game, the Detroit Lions are actually at Baltimore next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 22nd on Fox before they're home against the Las Vegas Raiders for Monday Night Football, October 30th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then the Detroit Lions have a bye week for Week 9. They won't be playing Week 9. They travel to the Los Angeles Chargers November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they host the Chicago Bears November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Looking at the Lions, over the next 5 weeks, I don't know where the loss is going to come. It could be Baltimore next week, maybe. But the Lions, like I said, they're to me on that tier just below San Francisco and Philly. They're next to like Seattle. Looking at the conference, they're like right there at third place, and it's the best in the conference. And Seattle is probably right there, and possibly the Cowboys as far as top 5 in the whole in the conference. So if the Lions want to keep pace and have a high conference seed, they'll have to win these next few games. And we'll talk more about these games as we get closer to them week to week. But that's what they if that's what they want to do to jockey for position, that's what'll have to take place here. Then the Sunday night football game here, that's the next game we're gonna talk about here before we talk about the Monday night football game. And then I'm gonna give you a final score for the game that occurred and went final earlier in the morning between the Ravens and the Titans. But the Sunday night football game is the Buffalo Bills hosting the New York Giants. That game will be taking place here at Highmark Stadium, Orchard Park, New York, 8:20 p.m. Eastern tonight on NBC. Buffalo is favored by 15, and that's actually seems pretty generous. Daniel Jones is not going to be playing tonight. He's actually out for tonight's game here with a neck injury. Darren Waller and Saquon Barkley are listed as questionable, so we'll know more about them actually playing closer to tonight. But Daniel Jones is going to be out for tonight's game here. So that's very interesting here. They're going to have a lot of issues here with Jones out, plain and simple. Jones being in there, I had Buffalo winning this game, but it's going to be a bloodbath. I don't see the New York Giants winning this football game unless Buffalo just plays sorry football. The Giants, they're going to be home against the Washington Commanders the following week, October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern. They also host the New York Jets October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they travel their next couple of games. They're at the Las Vegas Raiders, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, November 5th on Fox. Then they're at the Dallas Cowboys, November 12th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. It's going to be tough sledding for the Giants. I don't know where they get their wins from. Washington next week and the Jets the week after that are home games, so those are their best shots. But I don't see it. If Barkley can play, if Saquon Barkley can play tonight and kind of stay healthy for them, that'll kind of help spell the damage. But they're just not healthy and they're not good. That's a bad combination when you have health issues and you're just not a good team to begin with. So it's going to be rough for the Giants over the next 5 weeks. It's really going to be rough for this team over the next 5 weeks. The Buffalo Bills, like I said, they're trying to jockey for position in the AFC with the Chiefs, and the Dolphins and teams like that. So we'll have to see how they do after this. They're at New England next week, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, and I see that as a win. Then they have a Thursday night football game where they are hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I called that a victory on October 26th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Prime Video. I called that a video because the Bills are going to be at home, and I'm sticking to that. They're at the Cincinnati Bengals November 5th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC for Sunday Night Football. Then they're home against the Denver Broncos for Monday Night Football on November 13th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to call that a win. I don't care how far away we are. They're going to beat the Broncos. No doubt in my mind. With today's victory and then the Broncos a few weeks out, I could see them being 4-1 football team, at worst 3-2 over the next 5 weeks. The Bills do have a propensity to blow games, but a lot of that is due to Josh Allen not being careful with the ball. Outside of week one at the Jets, he's been very productive with the football. He hasn't really cost them. He has 11 touchdowns on the season, and that's just passing the football. That didn't even have anything to do with him running the football. So I still have a lot of confidence in Buffalo to hang around as kind of like that second or third best team in the AFC, kind of depending on what Miami does as well. So the Bills, they'll be in the mix. It's just a matter of where, as far as the top of the AFC. Now, the Monday night football matchup here, the Los Angeles Chargers, they're coming off a bye week last week. They're going to be hosting the Dallas Cowboys. That game takes place tomorrow night. That'll be at 8:15 Eastern on ABC. The Los Angeles Chargers, the Cowboys actually are favored by 1.5, which means that game is essentially a pick 'em. If the Chargers are getting back Austin Eckler, that's gonna help them a lot because as I stated earlier in the broadcast, Mike Williams, he's out for the season with that torn ACL. And Eckler, he hasn't been available for this team since week one when they played the Dolphins. So getting him back and getting him acclimated will definitely help as well. Joshua Kelly coming in place of Eckler has not worked out. He hasn't been that guy for them at all. So we'll have to see what the Chargers do. As far as the game goes, I'm gonna still take the Cowboys close because if that defense plays even a 7 or 8 out of 10 game, they'll win. They'll win this football game if that defense plays well at all. Dak Prescott, I'm gonna mention his name as many times as I need to with the Dallas Cowboys. He has not shown that he can take over a game when that Dallas Cowboys defense is not playing well. So that question, we're still gonna ask that question week to week until we see it, and then we see it on a consistent basis with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm still taking them to win tomorrow night, but I need more from Dak. The Chargers are going to be at the Kansas City Chiefs October 22nd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. I took the Chiefs to win that game, and I'm going to stick by that. I take the Chiefs close to win that football game. The Chargers will then be home against the Bears October 29th. That game is at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC for Sunday Night Football, and I'm taking the Chargers to win that. They then travel to the Jets for Monday Night Football November 6th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC before they host the Detroit Lions November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Looking at the next 5 games here, I do see them losing to the Chiefs for sure. But after that, after the Cowboys and Chiefs, you got the Bears, the Jets, and the Lions. The Lions, that on the back end could be scary for the Chargers because even though they're hosting them, but that's still about a ways away, and a lot of things can happen over the next 4 weeks. So, the Chargers could be 2-3 over the next 5 games, because of Dallas, Kansas City, and Detroit. I could see them beating the Bears and the Jets, though, for sure. I can see them beating the Bears and Jets for sure. And I'll have official predictions as we get closer to that game, but this is Kansas City's division. The Kansas City already has a 2.5 game lead on the Chargers already, and then they have a full 3 game lead on Vegas. So, and then you beat Denver head to head, and you have a 4 game lead on them. This is their division. This is more for jockeying in the conference more so than it is the division, as far as what it is for the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chiefs, as I said, this is their division, and they're jockeying for the conference. That's who I was referring to. Excuse me. But for the Chargers, if they want to keep pace, they got to win at least 3 or 4 of these next 5 games. Is that a possibility? Yes, but will they? Who's to say? The Chargers they're very up and down too, and with injury affecting them as they had, that's already putting them at a disadvantage. So we'll just have to see if the Chargers can keep pace. And then, like I said already, with the Cowboys, they're about the third or fourth best team in the NFC. And if they want to prove people right, they got to play good on offense too. We already know what the defense can do and what the defense can do against teams that are lesser than them. But what is that offense going to do? Before we get out of here, I'm gonna give you the final score. The Baltimore Ravens defeated the Tennessee Titans 24 to 16. Again, that took place at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London, England. That took place earlier this morning. The Ravens improved to 4-2, and the Titans unfortunately fall to 2-4. They're at the bottom of the AFC South at this point. The Titans. Looking at the statistics here, let's go ahead and dive into that game and kind of check that out here before we wrap up the broadcast today. Lamar Jackson was 21 of 30 for 223 yards with a touchdown and an interception, and was also the leading rusher with 13 carries for 62 yards. On the flip side for Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill was 8 of 16 for 76 yards and an interception before he left the game with an ankle injury. He was actually carted off. And Malik Willis came in relief and had four. He was 4 of 5 for 74 yards and also carried the ball 3 times for 17 yards. Derrick Henry for Tennessee had 12 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown, and he scored their only touchdown on offense. Nick Folk actually kicked 3 field goals and hit all of them. For Baltimore, this is crazy. Justin Tucker was 6 of 6. He kicked 6 field goals for this team to get them 18 points. Lamar Jackson did have a touchdown, but they actually failed on the conversion. So that's how they ended up with 24 points. It was nice for Baltimore to get the win, but two things jump out here immediately. Number one, Ryan Tannehill being hurt for the Titans. Is this going to be a long-term thing? And will Malik Willis come in and start for him? Will it be a situation where Will Levis sees some time? They got two young quarterbacks behind Ryan Tannehill, so they're going to want to evaluate both of those guys to see who's going to do what. On the side for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, he just hasn't really blown me away. He still does what he does as far as throwing the football and scrambling the football with the football, but I just don't see it from him as far as the dynamics that I saw just a couple of years ago prior to him getting his deal. So we'll just have to see with them. Looking at the passing statistics here, Tennessee, their leading receiver was Tajay Spears, the running back. He had 4 carries for 15 yards, but he had 1 catch for 48 yards. There were no touchdowns thrown by the Tennessee Titans at all. And DeAndre Hopkins only had 1 catch for 20 yards despite being targeted 5 times. He had a very rough day. On the Baltimore side, tight end Mark Andrews had 4 catches for 69 yards, but didn't find the end zone. He was targeted 6 times. Zay Flowers had 6 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, and he was targeted 8 times. So he was targeted the most by Lamar Jackson. I stated at the beginning of the season that I thought that he would make a difference as a rookie, and he's definitely making a huge difference. He was out targeted. He out targeted the next two receivers 8 to 7. Nelson Aguilar was targeted 3 times and had 2 catches for 40 yards. Odell Beckham Jr. was targeted 4 times and also had 2 catches for 34 yards. So he outpaced the next two receivers. So it's looking to me like Mark Andrews is the number one option as far as throwing the football, and Zay Flowers is the option after that down the field. So Baltimore Ravens, like I said, they improved to 4-2, and at this current time, they have a half lead over the Pittsburgh Steelers, who don't play today, and they have a full 2-game lead over the Cleveland Browns. We'll just have to see what they do off of their bye week and what Cincinnati is able to do as well. But Baltimore, with their victory today, yet also improving to 4-2. They're atop their division, and they're home against the Detroit Lions next week, 1 p.m. Eastern. They're at Arizona, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, October 29th, before they host the Seattle Seahawks and the Cleveland Browns, respectively. So we'll just kind of have to see what they do over the next few weeks after today, but they improved to 4-2. And on the flip side, the Tennessee Titans, as I said, they're going to have questions about Ryan Tannehill and whether he's going to be available with that injury. He was carted off. So whenever someone is carted off, that means they can't walk under their own power, and it's definitely going to be an issue. They host the Atlanta Falcons on October 29th. They have a bye week next week, so that'll definitely help. But then again, we still need to see if Ryan Tannehill, what the severity of that ankle injury is and if he'll miss time. But the Tennessee Titans host the Atlanta Falcons for their next game, October 29th, before they travel to Pittsburgh for a Thursday night football matchup, November 2nd at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Then they're at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they travel to Jacksonville 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS November 19th. So they got a lot of travel coming up after their bye week and their game against Atlanta. So we'll have to see if they get things together. But that's a huge loss here if Ryan Tannehill's going to miss any type of time. He hasn't been dynamic or been a great quarterback by any means, but missing time still means that there's going to be incontinuity at the quarterback position. So we'll just have to see how these games shake up here. I'll have the results for you for the entire Week 6 slate for you on Tuesday's broadcast, including the Monday Night Football matchup. I'll have the results for you, and I will have a preview for you of the Thursday Night Football matchup here to kick off Week 7. I'll go into detail about that and how I feel about that game as well here. But that's going to wrap up today's broadcast here. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the rest of the NFL action getting started here today, as will a lot of people. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel if this is your first time checking out the broadcast. And if this isn't your first time checking out the broadcast, I definitely appreciate you checking in with me on a week to week. But like I said, I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here and let you guys enjoy your day and enjoy the rest of your weekend with these NFL games coming up here. Again, this was episode 14 of The Hype Show, and I am Big J all day. Thank you so much again for joining me. You take care, and I'll see you guys again on Tuesday. Thank you.